Hey everyone, Daniel JS here, coming at you with another video where we work through the basic algorithm scripting challenges from freecodecamp.org. This particular challenge is called repeat a string, no pun intended. All right, so the challenge prompt says that repeat a given string, str, that's our first argument right here, for num times. That is our second argument. And we do have an edge case. It says that we need to return an empty string if num is not a positive number. Okay, so we definitely want to keep that in mind. And then it also says that for the purpose of this challenge, do not use the built-in .repeat method. Now I have to tell you that would have made our job a lot easier because that .repeat method is pretty powerful. It will actually repeat a string, whichever string it is called upon, for a given amount of times. So we're gonna have to be a little creative in terms of how we decide to address this challenge. So let's go ahead and get started. And you know what? I'm already thinking of two possible ways we can approach this. Since we can't use the .repeat method, we still have to repeat a certain process. What is that process? Well, we have this string right here, and basically we just need to be able to repeat whatever the string is for however many times this number is. And normally when we think repeat in programming, we think of some type of looping construct. So what I'm thinking is maybe we could create a for loop that will essentially concatenate whatever this value is this many times. And what we could do is we could create an empty string as a local variable to this function, and then we can basically concatenate this value to that string however many times we need to, and then when we break out of the loop, we can then return the final value. So that's what I'm thinking. I also have another idea of how we could solve this as well that might reduce our time complexity. Now, time complexity, that kind of goes into big O notation, and it involves the efficiency of a program in terms of how many times do we need to repeat a certain process, and how does that scale depending on how large the data set increases in quantity. So a lot of moving parts there, a lot of things that we have to think about, and sometimes our first solution isn't always the best, but there's nothing wrong with starting with a solution, even if it's not the most efficient one. We can always go back, make changes to it, improve it. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and start with that first solution by creating a local variable. We'll call this new str, and I'm going to initialize this to an empty string. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a for loop, and we're going to say for let I equals 0. We're going to start at 0, and then we're going to say I is less than num, and then we will say I plus plus. Now, what exactly do we want to repeat every time this for loop runs? Well, it's actually quite simple. What we want to do is we want to take this new string and we want to concatenate the value of the string being passed in to that new string. Okay, so to do this, I'm going to use the augmented assignment operator, and this is also known as the plus equals operator, but basically what this does is it will assign itself to whatever its current value is plus whatever is on the right operand. In this case, it will be the str value. Now that is all fine and dandy, but we're still returning the str value down here. Now this was actually just the default that FreeCodeCamp added for us. This has to change because we don't want to return the string that's getting passed in. We want to return that new string. So let's go ahead and run that. And I feel pretty comfortable with this. I say, why don't we go ahead and test this out and see if it works. All right, and it works. So there you have it, guys. Let's go ahead and close this, and let's talk about this solution right here and see if there's any way we could have done this a little bit differently. So this isn't actually a bad solution at all, but there are a couple considerations we want to keep in mind. First of all, as this number increases, the amount of times we have to run this for loop will also increase. So we have a time complexity of O of n, okay? So as the number increases, so does the amount of times we have to repeat this process. And what's also happening is the amount of data that's going to be assigned to this variable right here will also increase as well. So we also have a space complexity of O of n as well. So again, not terrible. Now, I'm not going to say this is the most efficient solution, but maybe there's some things that we can do to maybe make it a little bit better. So just keep that in mind. You know, there's always going to be ways that we can improve on what we do, but I'm going to show you another way we could have solved this. And this actually allows us to remove the for loop altogether. And also, we don't even have to create this string. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset this challenge, and we're going to start completely over this time. What we're going to do is take advantage of some of the things that we get with JavaScript, and also some of the knowledge that we have with some of these values. The str value is a string data type. Now, strings are actually called primitives in JavaScript, and these are basically your immutable types. You cannot mutate a string. Now, you can concatenate a string to another string. You can also concatenate a number to a string because of type coercion, but you can't get in there and actually change a string. You cannot change an original string. So there are some ways we can be very clever about the way we address this, and we could actually add this string as many times as we need to an array, and then we can join the values of that array into a string using the array.join method. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new array using the JavaScript Array Constructor. Now, you call this like a function. This actually kind of reminds me of how we would instantiate a class. And what I'm going to do is I am going to pass in the value of num. Now, when we pass in a single number value into the Array Constructor, like I'm doing right here, what this does is it tells the constructor how many slots, if you will, this array will have. So let's say, for example, in this case, we're passing in 3, okay? 3 is being passed in as an argument. This array will have 3 slots. Now, I'm going to also take advantage of the .fill method, and this is going to tell the array constructor what I actually want to place in those slots, which in this case is going to be the string value. This is going to fill those 3 slots in that array with the value of this string. And then what we can do is we can then call .join, and we're going to join on no space. So this is going to basically just join those 3 values together, therefore producing a string that's going to be repeated num times. So now we've addressed the main problem of this challenge. However, we're not considering the edge case, which is what happens if num is not a positive number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take advantage of a ternary operator, and ternaries are a lot of fun. Ternaries allow us to evaluate a condition first, which in this case is going to be num is less than 1. If num is less than 1, okay, I'm going to add my ternary. That's what the question mark is. If num is less than 1, what I want to do is return an empty string. Now, ternary stems from the meaning of 3. In this case, there are 3 operands for a ternary. You have the first operand where we're evaluating a condition, and then you have the second operand, which is the first value that is returned if the condition is true. Otherwise, if the condition is not true, we evaluate to the third and final operand, which in this case is going to be where we're adding the string value to the array num times and then joining it into a string. Let's go ahead and test this solution. And there you have it, guys. That pretty much sums up our video today. I went over 2 possible solutions for repeated string, and we went over a very simple first solution where we used a for loop, and then in the second version of this algorithm, we solved it using a ternary expression combined with the array constructor where we're passing in the string value num times and then joining it into a string. Obviously, there's always the time and space complexity that we have to keep in mind. In this case, we're not really having to worry too much about a looping construct. We are definitely creating some space that we have to keep in mind. And also another thing that we probably want to be considerate of is that we had to create an array that we eventually ended up removing and turning into a string. Now, there's definitely some opinions around that. Should I have created an array? That is a very good question. Sometimes some people frown on creating an array that we're eventually going to throw away. This would actually be considered an anti-pattern. Now, in this case, it's probably not too bad of a solution, but again, there's definitely more than one way to solve a problem, which in this case, if I had to go back and do it all over again, I probably would have used the .repeat method and called it a day. But I will let you decide on which solution works best for you. And until next time, I hope you enjoy this video, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much.